The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Money Radio staff, management, or advertisers, and do not represent an offer to buy or sell any securities. Some interviews heard on this program may be sponsored by the participants. It's time for Health Futures with Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and it must be Friday, and indeed it is. We're coming at you live from the Scottsdale Air Park studios of Money Radio, 1510 AM, 105.3 FM, and the World Wide Web, moneyradio1510.com. If this is the first time you've tuned into our show is about how our older adult population can live a healthier, happier life. And how do they do that? They do that by listening to the show. And not so much about me, it's about the guests I bring. And today is no different. I've got an extraordinary guest who is donning my studio for the first time in 6 years. I'm really pleased to have Dr. James Deering here in the studio. He was here back in April of 2015, and here he is again in August 2021. Welcome to the show, Dr. Deering.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. You're a very experienced family physician who's been practicing medicine for a long time. And when I first met you, and I said this when you came into the studio today, I first met you about 17 years ago at John C. Lincoln, and I was very enamored with the program that you had there. You were doing transitionary care before there was such a thing called transitionary care, which was really fascinating. And then you and I became really reacquainted when you came over to Scottsdale Healthcare, or Honor Healthcare. Actually, it was Scottsdale Healthcare back in the day, and you were working with their ACO, and you were their VP, CEO, CMO of the ACO. So you are now doing something different, and I would love not only to learn, as I said to you when you walked in, don't tell me yet. I want you to tell me at the same time you tell our listeners. Tell me a little bit about Synergy Health 360, because that seems to be the new venture that you're working on.
Sure. So this is a venture for private physicians, primary care focused, primary care approach that integrates the entire healthcare continuum so that we decrease the steps that people have to go through to get through this thing called healthcare, which in a lot of the ways is a maze.
It is.
And that maze takes multiple different directions at high frustration. And our goal, we attack every one of where the touch points that weren't working with the way we were doing things before, and we start there. And the goal is if we take away as many of those pain points for people, they actually get highly engaged. And the ultimate goal is that we need people to get healthy and to take control of their own life. And most of us don't do that. We have a laundry list of reasons why we don't do that. But the fact is, our goal is to try to teach as many of our patients, give them the tools to be successful to take care of themselves. If you think about 75% of the entire healthcare dollar is spent on chronic disease, most of which is all preventable by things we do or don't do to ourselves. And we can't sustain that. Number one, the cost continues to go up. The wear and tear on people's lives go up. Especially in the age group that we are starting to be in, it is highly effective, and it goes across multiple planes. It makes it hard for quality of life to be there. And if you focus on their quality of life, then they have to engage in their own life in order to be successful. And we brought a team of doctors and nurse practitioners and our entire team with that goal in mind.
And it sounds like, and again, I'm learning for the very first time here. It sounds like more it's a team approach, really making the patient really take ownership to their health. You know, I'd love for you. You brought up pain points. I mean, all of us are dealing with pain points. Can you give us a sense of some of those pain points
Sure.
that we experience as,
Yeah,
as consumers?
one of the biggest pain points that happen is when you go to a hospital and you're being seen by people that you've never seen before at a time that you need someone that you trust. Forget about COVID for a second, because that eliminated all of your support system. But even before that, it was very difficult to be able to trust the person who was giving you the information about the critical part of the care you're getting during an acute event. Our team goes to the hospital, so we see you as part of that continuum. So there's no chance that handoff breaks. That's one of the big values, and a great example of those touch points.
Sure, and you know, so much has changed. You know, I've not been a practicing doctor for 34 years, but I've been in the healthcare field for a while, and you know, in your time, we've seen so much technology, and you know, for instance, EMRs. You know, EMRs didn't exist when you started your practice, and when I was on the Governor's Advisory Council on Aging, when I first joined it about 7 years ago, there were less than 20% of the hospitals that were connected through the EMRs. And now we have over 70% that are, and there's a lot of information, but I think what you're saying is there's still the need for that personal touch. Machines and technology only can do so much.
So technology to me is a tool that helps me give the care that I give. You mentioned electronic medical record, which is what an EMR is.
Right.
Nobody came into my office or to any practicing doc's office and watched how we did our job and made a tool that helped us do that job better. They gave us a tool with all the bells and whistles on them, and now we have to learn that and try to not forget that we're taking care of that patient.
Right.
That's why it's the biggest hassle factor for all physicians to this day, and the primary reason is that the tool doesn't make us better. The tool is one thing that helps us capture information, and we can learn things from it, but it's not an efficient tool made that way yet. And 70% is a great number, but until we have 100%, every day somebody's going to have a disconnect with their care.
And you know, it's interesting. I've heard that. You know, people have said that the EMR concept and tools are being developed by the MBAs, not the MDs, and a lot of times, you know, they don't really understand what is needed to be able to gather that kind of information and provide great care.
And they sometimes will have physicians that are involved, but a lot of them have not had clinical contact in a while, and they forget some of the basic steps that you have to take into consideration to make that tool most efficient.
Sure. So tell me, when I think of Synergy 360, I mean, Synergy Health 360, what does it encompass? Obviously, Dr. Deering is at the pinnacle, but you have a team of nurses, you have a team of navigators, you know, what is involved in that?
So it's probably worthwhile to say that the owner of the company actually started in Sacramento.
Okay.
And he started as a hospitalist, and he built a robust hospitalist program up in the Sacramento area. And his wife is a trauma surgeon here at Maricopa County for the burn unit. And that's a very unique thing that happened. In fact, she was actually called into mission last night because of the catastrophe that happened in Chandler.
Wow.
And she was on call doing surgery all night long because of those things that took place. So we have that part of it too. But because when she got the job here, for a year and a half, he was traveling back and forth from Sacramento to Scottsdale, and on weekends, and he just got tired of doing that. So we brought the whole company here.
Nice.
And so we built the primary care focus because I truly believe, and so does Dr. Jane, who is the owner and actually the driving force. He also did a fellowship with Andrew Weil at the University of Arizona
Sure.
for wellness, and so He's trained in that and certified in that. So we have a main focus in health and wellness in everything that we do. We just brought on Dr. Shannon Lancaster, who is the head physician for Arizona State University for all athletics. Outstanding physician. She's also the president-elect of the Arizona Academy of Family Physicians. So we go for the best and we look for the best because we create the best product when you do that. And we have a group of 10. We have GYNs that are involved with us, and they do an outstanding job because they touch a lot of points for women's health. And we have nurse practitioners. Some of them, both of our nurse practitioners worked in the emergency room for 10 plus years before they became nurse practitioners. So they're top of the line on what they do for those. And then the touch points are we have a nursing team that will help if we have IV infusions. We do work exclusively with the bone marrow transplant team, which is the highest risk patients that exist.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a longevity process that we connect and coordinate that on the outpatient basis. And a variety of things. But if you imagine what 360 does, it's taking every touch point and as best we can connecting them. And to the level that we do, you will get that continuity of care that you expect. And we're not there yet. We're relatively new.
Sure.
We've been here 2 years, although all of us have been practicing for a long time, but as a collective unit. And so little growth pains, especially with COVID. But the reality is that's what it does.
Wow. I mean, first, I hear the music coming, so we're almost at a break, but I do want to make a comment about the burn unit here in Maricopa County. It is world-renowned.
It is world-renowned.
People come here from all over because they are that good.
Exactly.
And
one of our team is one of them.
I had a chance to serve and care for Dr. McDonald Wood, who was one of the founders of that. His bust is downstairs in the basement, and I had a tour of it. Fabulous. One of the great secrets that we have here in Phoenix, Arizona.
Fantastic.
You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. I'm here with Dr. James Deering. Stick around. We're talking about Synergy Health 360. We're down one segment. We got 3 more to go. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. Got a little Steely Dan bringing us into the second segment. And if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Health Futures. And I got Dr. James Deering here in the studio. He is with Synergy Health 360. And if you missed the first segment, you can catch it up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button, third button down is radio show, and you'll catch this show and many others. So I'm going to give Dr. Deering and his practice a shameless plug. And if you want to learn more about them, go to synergyhealth360.com. And Synergy spelled SYNERGY, health360.com, or call 480-553-6181. They're an integrated primary care practice with specialty services. And as Dr. Deering shared with us in the first segment, they're about 2 years new. I'm looking at their website. It's really easy to navigate. And you got locations in Northwest Phoenix and in Scottsdale.
Correct.
Now, fantastic. And, really, I want to focus in on this segment about, choosing, a primary care and what questions patients should be asking when they are trying to search out a primary care physician. And you, Dr. Deering, have been doing it for 34 years, and you've been focusing on primary care family practice in all that time. Can you give our listeners a sense of what they should be looking for?
Well, you have to have somebody you trust at the end of the day. So you're looking for a connection. And I would say to get in the door, there's no better place than talking to your neighbor, talking to your friend who had a good experience. If they have a similar personality to you, if you get along with them and they get along with whoever they're going to recommend, that's a really good first pass. We get a lot of people that come to us and they were referred by a patient that already exists. So that's probably the single best place. The health plans generally have, they do it based on where you live. So they do try to make it comfortable that way. And they do try to guide you towards the people that have the most opportunity to be able to see you. So that's another way to do that. There's all kinds of places where physicians get rated. The medical societies are pretty good at guiding you towards the right place. And, just doing the due diligence, but that gets you in the door. The biggest ticket, though, remember, this is going to be a team, and our job is to be an advocate for you for everything that happens to you in the healthcare area.
Right.
So if you don't get along with me or you don't trust me, what are the chances that you're going to follow the recommendations that I give?
Exactly.
It makes no sense, and it's a disconnect, and it will not lead towards an integrated approach to getting you excited about taking care of yourself. So I think those are the biggest first passes.
So you mentioned health plans. You take health plans, I take it?
Yes, we're on a whole bunch of health plans.
Okay, and Medicare as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
Okay, so health plans, you work with health plans, and as I gave out the number, if you were interested in signing up, they should call that number. And do you get to choose who your practitioner is, or is it based on who's available, based on your location?
As a rule, we try to get you to choose.
Okay.
And if you don't have a choice, we give you one of them with the understanding for the very reasons I just said.
Sure.
If you overall like what was said, but you're struggling with the way they say it, meaning personalities aren't perfect, all of us have a little different approach personality-wise. We all give the same great care, and you'll find that in the people that you get an opportunity to see.
So in the middle of this pandemic, or say just before this pandemic you started, and then this pandemic happened.
Yes.
Tell me what that was like for you guys. I mean, how did you guys navigate through all of that? And I do see on the website that you do telehealth. Were you doing it prior to?
We were, yes. We were doing that before. So the good news about my background and the good news about Dr. Jane's background in particular is that we've kind of been on the front end of trying to change healthcare since we started. I know what doesn't work through personal experiences with family members and having to be that caregiver for them and seeing what doesn't work for them. And also many patients' war stories of what they told me. So we took advantage of those, and we want to try to make some impact that it improves that. And that's what we kind of focus on. I took the time to kind of write down for the senior population, but I'm going to go on record as saying this was for every patient. Social isolation became a critical component because no one was allowed to be with the patient when it occurred. And that broke the entire health care system for a variety of reasons, starting with the patient. Can you imagine being in a hospital where nobody wants to be in the first place? Everything around you is all new. You may be on tubes or all kinds of things, so you can't get around without somebody helping you. And you may have heard half of what the physician said when they came in to talk to you because you were scared, and you have nobody to be able to hear it as well and help you get through that. And none of your primary care was with you at that point in time.
Sure.
You had no advocate.
Right.
Social isolation was bad before. It was exponentially increased as a result of that.
So true.
And so that's a big deal. And remember on the healthcare side, the nurses, God bless them, because they did an incredible job, but nobody trained them on how to be a caregiver. I mean, as a caregiver for the care of the patient emotionally,
Right.
their job is to take care of you medically, and they were having to do both. And they are overrun because of that ask that occurred. Big time difference. We haven't recovered completely from that. We're getting high burnout rates. We're having a lot of staff problems across the country, and certainly in this area as well, which is a big deal. And so those are important things as well.
You know, you mentioned the nurses, and you know, I got to tell you, what they did for the people that they care for is truly remarkable. Because not only were they practicing clinicians, but they were their pseudo family members. They were the ones trying to FaceTime, with the loved ones, so they could have some words with them before they put them on ventilators. It was really tragic what happened. I mean, many of the family members would be able to come in for compassionate visits, but the compassionate visits were when they were already almost gone. And I think that there's definitely some lingering effects from that, PTSD type things that these nurses are going to be dealing with probably for the rest of their lives.
Yes, no doubt about it.
Well,
and the physicians as well.
Sure.
To be fair, they all of us jumped in and tried our best.
Right.
But it's a big deal to do what we had to do. But the problem is it hurt the patient at the end of the day because they didn't have that support.
It really did. Well, you hear the music. It's hard to believe we're halftime here at Health Futures. You're listening to Health Futures. I'm your host, Bob Roth. I've got Dr. James Deering here in the studio. He is with Synergy Health 360. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and if you're just tuning in, we're in the second half here of our show. We're coming at you live from the Scottsdale Air Park Studios, August 27th. This is our last show of August. Hard to believe it. We're going to be roaring into September next Friday. But I am really, really pleased to have Dr. James Deering here in the studio. He is with Synergy Health 360. He's a family medicine physician here in the Valley for over 34 years. I had a chance to meet him, and I said this at the top of the show when he was over at John C. Lincoln. And then I got a chance to get even further acquainted with him when I had him here on the show 6 years ago when he was over here at Honor Health in Scottsdale and also at the ACO. Back then it was Scottsdale Health Partners, and then it became ICP. And now this venture he's got going on right now is a phenomenal entity that is serving the Valley here, and they do primary care work. And I gave a shameless plug before, but I want to give it again. If you want to reach out to Dr. Deering and his team, you want to go to synergyhealth360.com, or you want to call 480-553-6181. And, Dr. Deering, when we were talking in the second segment, I think the thing that you and I were talking about as we were closing, we were talking about COVID, and we were talking about how you need an advocate. And it's not just during COVID, it's during any part in life. And whether, we are absent of this pandemic or with this pandemic, you need an advocate. And that is really the premise behind Synergy Health 360, correct?
Yes. Yeah, there's a few reasons for that. In my career, I'll give you a simple example how I learned that early. I would tell somebody in the office, quit smoking, and they would be told that literally every visit. And then when I would see the spouse would say, how come you never tell them to quit smoking? So a light bulb went off that they're going to tell selective things that they heard. And I started recommending, and I do this with chronic care patients regularly. I want them to have an advocate at the seat at the table,
right,
to be able to hear what what's being said. So A, the patient gets exactly what we're talking about, and B, that they've got an advocate to help them now through that journey, and that nothing's left out. So that was an example that happened early in my career. I took advantage of that. I don't want that to happen, and I also took it that it could be selective things, but it also could be they're not hearing everything that I'm talking to them about. So I want them to understand everything we said. So having somebody else there, it really solidifies that. And I've done that my entire career.
Sure, sure. And certainly, you smoking, whether it be smoking, drinking, the amount of sugar you're taking in, the amount of sodium you're taking in. I mean, all of these things are really important to good health.
Absolutely. If you take into consideration, and I'm just going to go through a couple things that I thought through that I think are important. This pandemic has brought a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of anger, a lot of disconnects within family members just because of different stances that they take on the medical issues.
Yes.
But it really kind of goes down to appreciating and attacking maybe mental health, and remembering what that mental health. I don't even like to use the word mental health because it's really brain health. If you want your body to work well, you need mind, body, and spirit. And when people use caffeine regularly, like the first thing they do is have coffee before they get up and regularly through the day to be alert and wake up, and then they use alcohol at night to get to sleep, you basically are doing a disservice to your brain health. And that brain health, because it causes inflammatory symptoms, it causes some cognitive disorders over time, you're going to make it harder for the rest of the body to work as efficient as it should. So I think that that's an important concept to take in mind. And I'm in this age group that we're talking to today, and I'm just going to go through a few because they hit me personally, but they'll hit everybody
Please do.
Everybody on here. So the pandemic and that is important. But remember, at the end of the day, we have pride. Our generation was brought up with that, and as a caregiver, I'm trying to do the best for you, and I may not hear everything because of your pride. You're proud. So if you lost a job and you can't afford the medicine that I'm going to give you, it's not likely that you're going to tell me. I'm going to learn that the hard way when I find out through the pharmacist that you didn't pick it up, or that you didn't pick it up in a timely fashion. And when I now talk to you about that and I find out it was really cost, that you were having to cut the pills in half or take it every other day to make it stretch out because you had to pay the electric bill, that's a big deal. And that's what coordinated integrated care is. If you don't get to the core issue, you can't fix them. When I was in my other positions, we used to have a large amount of people that were readmitted. And in the first pass, the data by our electronic value, our data showed that it was a disproportionate number of problems with the diabetics. So we put a whole bunch of resources into diabetes care, and nothing changed. The readmissions continued. So a light bulb went off. Why don't we talk to the people that actually got readmitted and find out what's going on? And there was a disproportionate number that were being admitted on a Friday. Why was that happening on a Friday? And we talked to them, and it turned out because they didn't. Meals on Wheels is Monday through Friday. We partnered with our food bank. We gave them food, and the readmissions went away at an almost very little cost. Huge amount of benefit to the patient, but if you don't ask the right question, you're always going to end up with the wrong answer. So that's an important concept there. 25% of the population over the age of 60 is diabetic. So that is a 25%. And diabetes is the only disease that exists that affects every organ system in the body. Number one cause of blindness, number one reason for a heart attack or a stroke, number one reason for impotence, number one reason for dialysis. So it is critical that diabetic is on board to help themselves And by the way, we haven't talked about this at all, but diet and exercise, and everybody hates to hear that, but diet and exercise at its core will prevent that 75% of the chronic disease more than anything else that you do. And it's an important concept to just kind of remember that part of the puzzle.
Sure.
With the we're all having a hard time with age, with vision changes, hearing changes, cognitive decline. Well, it makes it harder for you to do things the way you always did before, so you cut back, and social isolation even becomes more of an important, and it goes back to that pride issue. So if you have to understand where they're coming from so you can help them help themselves to be more successful in what they do. And degenerative disease and osteoarthritis, we have a robust musculoskeletal program because we know that everybody aches and pains, and we take care of everybody young and old. I'm still the team doc for Thunderbird High School after all these years, and we have a head physician for Arizona State University for all athletics, so we know how to play in that space pretty well. And end of life is a big deal. When you talk about end of life, most people don't talk about it because that means you have to talk about an ending. Well, because there's always an ending, and we want quality of the time you have left, the more preparation you do, the more success you're going to have, which is really, at the end of the day, what I think is the most important. And we use telehealth, and telehealth services, by the way, 60% of all the care that the average person needs can be done safely and well with telemedicine. We were doing it before COVID, we're doing it during COVID, and it absolutely makes a big difference on that part of the puzzle as well. And then the only other things that I thought were important, nutrition and nutritional, a lot of people are nutrition deficient. And the big bad ones, the ones that people have a lot of problems with, is magnesium, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin C, D, and E, potassium, and iron. And so that's one of the reasons for being engaged with your primary care physician and specifically your family doc, because we're experts in that area, and we can certainly help guide you through those and make sure you're not one of them. And if so, we help you with those. And just remember that there's things, because of the anxiety and depression that's hit, there are some natural things that actually work before you have to go to the big guns. So as it relates to anxiety, which is a big one, magnesium, thiamine, and GABA are all good things. And the things that I'm talking to you about, there's data to show that it could help. It may not in every circumstance, but it could help. But more importantly, there's no data to say it's going to hurt you. So therefore, why not try? That's the importance of that. And if there's a memory issue, ginkgo biloba, and for focus, green tea and zinc is helpful for focus. And the omega-3 fatty acids are actually a value added for depression. So those are just little ticklers to let you know there's depth underneath, but they all play a part in the success of you taking care of yourself, which is what we believe in.
Well, as we wind down this third segment, Dr. Deering, I feel like I got a lot of work to do. But I will say this. I'm doing a lot of these things already, and I think you've given all of us a great reminder of things that we should be looking at and doing. And I mean, let's face it, you talked about diet and exercise, but I like to think it's not just diet, it's nutrition. Because everyone gets onto these really fancy diets, right? Whether it's an all-protein diet or the Miami Beach diet. I mean, those aren't sustainable.
Right.
You need to make life-type changes, and you need to cut out some of that bad stuff.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, I guess, I've always believed everything in moderation.
Couldn't agree more.
We're down 3 segments. Got one more with Dr. Deering. Stick around. We'll be right back. We're back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and If you're just tuning in, we're in our fourth segment, and I've got Dr. James Deering here in the studio. He's with Synergy Health 360. If you missed those first three segments, go up to our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button. Third button down is radio show, and you can catch this show and many, many more. So, Dr. Deering, you've really done a great job of laying out what you guys are doing in terms of, comprehensive primary care and family practice that you guys have created over the last 2 years. And just that last segment was just so great. I mean, I wish I could bottle that up in terms of all the things that, we need to focus in on. I said this to you at the break. We're a society that's always looking for a magic pill. And I can't believe how many people are taking anti-anxiety drugs and stuff like that when there's so much good stuff out there. Just getting out there. I mean, we live here in Arizona. I know it's August 27th, but the evenings are going to start getting cooler. The days are going to be getting cooler, and there's so much that we can do outdoors, so much we can do. And you talked about exercise and diet and nutrition, so much that we can do and take on ourselves, right? And not to be dependent on, these, whether it be caffeine or whether it be drugs that people are taking.
Sure. So I would ask everyone, if you took a deep breath and you hold it for a count of 3, and then let it out for 6 seconds, so double the amount on the way out. And if we did that for 10 times in a row, you would get an immediate benefit in terms of an emotional positive. Immediate benefit.
Wow.
You have to do it 10 times. So
10 times in a row.
just to try to let people know, and there's yoga that can be done in the sitting position for all of those that have a hard time walking and getting up. Tai Chi is a very effective way to do multiple exercises that no matter what your mobility is, we have the opportunity to be able to help with those kind of things as well. But they're critical adds. And I'd also tell you with the depression, for those of you that you mentioned about the drugs and that a lot of people are on them for a long time, and some people need them for a finite period of time.
Sure.
So, for instance, 60% of people that have a heart attack, within 18 months, they will have depression. 60% will have full-blown depression that has to be dealt with within 18 months. It could be worse, but we know those for sure. So my point being, for a finite time, in addition to the other things we try, we do use some of those other kind of medications, but the vast majority can be removed at 5 to 6 months. You put in all the things that help with that depression, you take away some of those barriers, and then the medication is no longer needed. So medications are always needed in the right setting, but you also have to keep an eye on them that they're not just kept going and we don't reevaluate those, because most people can in fact get off in 5 to 6 months. Now, if you have bipolar, if you have schizophrenia, if you have any disorder where it's a chemical imbalance, that's a different story, and they're on it for long periods of time. But the average person, they're down on their luck. You're fixing the problem that exists. And I guess the other thing I would tell all the people who's helping all of us who are 65 and over, those are called caregivers. And I could not tell you how important you are for the healthcare system, because you do so many things over and above what everybody else can't do for that patient. But I'm going to tell you one simple thing that's an ask for you. You have to take 2 half days off a week. 2 half days off a week to allow for the ability for you to recharge your battery. Because
Amen.
Most people I see, they come in, they do it till they can't take it anymore, and they're angry. They've lost the ability to do the TLC. You need to charge you up at the same time you're helping them. It's actually better for the patient at the end of the day. Please take care of yourself as well.
I did not ask Dr. Deering to talk about that. I talk about that all the time here on the show. So thank you so much, because we have data that shows 63% of the time the caregiver predeceases the care recipient, because they don't do that. They need to recharge their batteries.
And sadly, we see them every day, and we want to do something about it. So that's one of the things. These tools, like I said, this is for all ages, not just for the seniors.
So I want to say we got maybe 30 seconds left. I want to give you another plug here. Synergy Health 360, an integrated primary care practice that has specialty services as well, serves in Phoenix as well as Scottsdale. You can reach them at synergyhealth360.com, 480-553-6181. What lasting comments would you like to leave our listeners?
There's nobody out there that can't take care of themselves. We have to make a focus and a direction that's valuable, and you need a way to find a path. We are one of the options for you to help you find that path.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. You covered so much great stuff. There's so much I would love to ask you more of, if you would. So I definitely am going to have you come back. I definitely want to have you come back. And one of the things that you touched on was end of life. And so many of us are afraid to talk about it. We need to talk about it.
Absolutely.
We need to have those discussions because you need to memorialize those wishes.
Yes.
Dr. James Deering, thank you so much for donning my studio and joining me here today. You make it a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll be back next Friday.
Thank you.
There's no place like home. You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress Home Care Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit cypresshomecare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3.